going to go over the major takeaways from the CFS evaluation of those two HI examples, because what really matters is that you take away lessons from these examples and then you apply it to your own HI. So what I'm going to do is first go over the actual scores of the examples, my major takeaways I want you to apply to your HI, and then I've also compiled your guys' feedback. So let's go over the actual scores of the two examples. First up, this is what you guys said was the better HI. So 64% of you did say example 2 was better, which is the correct answer. It is definitely by far the better choice. I was pretty shocked that so many of you did say HI example number 1 was the better one, but I think it's because you guys based it on the fact that HI example 1 actually had the question, whereas HI example 2 did not include the question. Big overall lesson, you cannot grade overall based off of one component, because overall the components of 2 were way better than all of the components of 1, even though 1 did have the question and 2 did not. So like I said, the reasoning you guys gave for picking example 1 over example 2 was that it stated the question, which is true, it actually did. And I really wanted you guys to catch that HI example 2 did not have the question. However, these are all the reasons you guys provided for why HI number 2 was better. They had better academic vocabulary. They had WAS, which shows they actually know what they're talking about, which is the whole purpose of me having you guys complete the HI Here's the Story, is it's helping me to see, do you actually understand the topic? They varied up their sources, they explained their sources, it was very structured and organized with a thesis, everything connected back to the topic, and their analysis was far superior, especially because they did what the HI really needs, which is including perspectives and then evaluating those perspectives for their values and limitations within section 2, in addition to section 1. So just to go over HI scoring, again, before I release the scores for those, Section 1, the OPCVL of the 2 sources is out of 6. Section 2, the big chunk, the investigations, out of 15. And Section 3 is out of 4. So example number 1, they scored a 3 out of 6 for the OPCVL. Section 2, they scored a 4 out of 15 because they greatly lacked analysis. Their evidence was not relevant or credible a lot of the time, and they tended to stray off topic, like many of you noticed. Section 3, they got a 1 out of 4 on the reflection because they wrote as a high school student and not as a historian. Example 2 scored a 4 out of 6 on the OPCVL. They definitely could have been bumped up to a 5 or a 6 had they included their question. Their question was listed on their title page, but IB doesn't receive that nor grade it. So it's so important you actually include the components that are required. Otherwise, you can't be scored for them. Their section 2, 12 out of 15, very, very, very well done. Lots of analysis and evaluation of perspectives. And section 3, their reflection got a 2 out of 4. It focused a little bit too much on the selection of the topic as opposed to the actual research process, methodology, etc. Both of these HI examples you read are from Laguna, and I can tell you, having been the year 1 teacher for both of those students, the amount of work and time put into the research definitely showed. Example number 1, that person completed the HI assignments just for the sake of completing them, didn't even apply the feedback that I had given to the person that would have greatly improved it. And the second person was constantly asking for feedback, applying it, and really spent a lot of time researching. So the amount of time you put into the research and the effort you put into that will correlate to a better score and a better HI. To read a top example that's provided by IB, go ahead and click here on the Google Slides, or it's linked in the master slides. You'll notice the format's a little different, but you'll also be able to see a really strong example. So now I'm going to go over my major points, 6 things I really want you to take away, and you can totally ignore the our products thing. I forgot to change it, my bad. Okay, so the very first thing is the scoring is based on what you do, not what you don't do. So the best way to think about it is for each section, you're going to start at 0. As you're including things, the scorer will add points for you, and that is why the example number 2 capped out at 4 points, because on the OPCVL section 1, because that was as high as she get. She didn't do one of the requirements that could have increased her grade, which is going to bring me to section 2. Make sure you, or number 2, include all the requirements. If it's not there, you cannot earn the points for it. You cannot be rewarded for including it. Number 3, make sure you have strong research. You should not move on to the writing process if your research is weak, has flaws, and whatnot. Because if that happens, your writing is going to end up so repetitive and unclear because you're going to be forcing arguments. The research process is the longest part. It is the most arduous, and if you have good research, it is going to lend to a strong outline and strong writing. Next step, actually make sure you answer your question. You will notice, as many of you did, example 1 did not do that. Everything needs to connect back to your question. If it doesn't have to do with your question, cut it, because remember, you're working within extremely limited word counts. Section 1 should only be 500 words, section 2, 1,300, section 3, 400. That's a lot to get across. I think that's exactly what happened with example 2. This person was my student previously, and her HI initially started at like 3,800 words, which is far above the total count. I think she focused so much on getting down the words that she ended up leaving out many of the components. Also, you have to include multiple perspectives and not just recognize them, but evaluate them for their values and limitations. There is no perfect evidence. All evidence has strengths and then has things that it's missing. So one way that you could do this and integrate this into section 2 is you start off with one of the perspectives and say, like, it reveals this. However, it does not reveal this as pointed out by this source. You have to do that because there is no one piece of evidence that is complete in answering your question. Last but not least, you want to make sure your writing is clear and concise so that your reader can actually understand what you're trying to say. So the key to this, first and foremost, is be proactive, have strong research and an outline, and then the writing will write itself. It will make it so easy. Also, make sure you use a transitions master list. I linked it here in case you have misplaced your copy. Read it aloud and then have others review it. This is going to be very, very helpful in making sure it's coherent. I would also like to just point out the transitions master list is going to make sure that you are varying up your transitions and not ending up sounding formulaic or repetitive like example 1 did, as many of you noted. This last part, I'm not going to read over every feedback. I'm just going to point out some major things of what you guys said. So this is your guys' feedback from example 1. These are all the things you guys took away. This is what I need to do based off of what I read in example 2. The black highlight are the ones I really, really want to emphasize. I especially think that this one will be helpful. Start with 3 clear main ideas that answer your question, and then you can explore the perspectives within each of those main ideas. These are the things you said not to do, so definitely read over these. And then here are the ones for example 2. There's lots of great feedback in here, and so definitely read this and heed it. And then last but not least, this is what not to do. So hopefully this helps you to understand the direction of your HI. Please reach out to me with questions. We can talk on Remind. We can set up an office hour phone call. If 3 to 4 does not work for you, we can find a better time that works for you. I don't know you have confusions if you don't let me know, especially now during this distance learning time. So you guys got this, and hope that this video helped.